This is the Unearthing Art podcast with Michele Luminato and Bec Lee, where we dig into the messy reality of making art that matters, raw and real conversations about being an artist, navigating the creative process, and expressing our honest and sometimes weird selves.
Michele, today I thought we could have a chat about a feeling that I get, and I know I'm a little bit weird, but I'm sure that I'm not so weird that I'm the only person who has this feeling. But a feeling that I get sometimes where it just feels really difficult to get into the studio. I just really find myself avoiding it, almost like my body's preventing me, from going in there. Something's in the way.
Yeah, I think, well, for starters, you're not alone. I definitely don't think you're alone. I think that we all experience that at some level. And what I'm really curious to know more about is sort of the background of like how we are as individuals and how we think about things. We've talked about our backgrounds being very different. You were a great A student. I was not. I can say honestly, that was a very big difference. So I was always striving for perfection, but never really felt like I achieved it. I did find that I did get better grades when I went to art school because I really liked it. But, that striving for perfection was something that I was always attempting to do. And I say I still do. Mm-hmm. And it does catch me in the studio pretty frequently. So I'm just curious, as a super high achiever from the beginning, does that play into the way you're experiencing your art practice as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we always feel a bit weird until we hear someone else telling their story and we go, hang on, that is exactly like me. I am not such a strange bird after all. Because I've certainly read other people retelling how being someone who does well academically in school, in early school and high school, isn't necessarily all it's cracked up to be, particularly people who find a bit of natural book smarts that carries them through their school life, because I think we all have different talents in different areas. And certainly, when they were handing out athleticism, completely missed this girl. Like, I've got none of that.
We've got that in common because I have the same thing. I cannot do a single sport. I was relegated to, when I tried out for the basketball team, which is hilarious because I'm super short. Yeah. They gave me the job of ball girl. I got to pick up the balls.
Nice. On our sports afternoons, we had choices of things we could do. And I would always end up choosing the kind of things like there was a walking group. Just walk.
Just walk.
So other people are, doing the soccer and the tennis and the football and whatever else. And I'm just walking laps, talking to my friends. The way that our education system is now, it definitely favors people who slide quite easily into book learning, that kind of structured learning. And so, definitely that was me. I did well. I studied physics and higher maths in high school and all that kind of thing.
I'm glazing over. I'm like, what?
Which can sound super impressive.
I was so far away from all of that. I was like, don't even get me near that stuff.
But the thing is, then we get, this story, which I think both of us would have absorbed in that time, which is the people who are doing well in those kind of areas, they must have life sorted.
Yes, because with me, I don't think people expected much of me, which is hilarious.
Right.
And there was a bit of like flying under the radar for that, I think, that happened. And so when I did well in art school, it was like surprising for all of us. It was like, oh, I can actually do all right when you like something.
Isn't it funny, the layers in this? So on one hand, there's this idea that like a kid who's doing well, even that early stage of life, they must have it together. If they're doing well now, they're going to continue doing well. I think the kid themselves believes that, and probably, the other ones who maybe aren't meeting those same high expectations probably look at them and say, well, they're just going to go through uni, they're going to get a great job. Everything's going to work out because
it's all laid out.
It's all laid out. Yeah. As though everything works on that one kind of standard or that one way of operating in the world. And so in some ways, and this is not an unusual story, that I know that when so-called high achievers, particularly ones who maybe don't have to do a great deal of work to be high achievers, let's say, get further along in their studies or higher studies, it can become a bit of a shock because they're being so used to having success come fairly easily and kind of feeling very capable. And so when you start to hit obstacles where the answers don't come so quickly and where suddenly you don't have the same, it's not as obvious to you what's right and wrong. It's not as obvious to you like, oh, here's how the system works and this is how I get an A+ at the end of the semester.
Hold on.
Life's not like that.
And art is definitely not like that. That's one thing that I was just listening, thinking, I mean, I think as artists, I hear this a lot where I think we're always looking for the one right answer, and there isn't one right answer. And so I find that, you know, even for myself, when I go into the studio, even today, like I will do something and I do feel that little hesitation of like, is it what I'm going to do next? Will that mess this up? You know? And I do find a little bit of, I think now it's more hesitation. I do catch myself, but I think that it's something that still comes up because I am trying to achieve, you know, perfection, as if there's a right answer.
Yeah.
By the way, like, what does perfection look like anyway?
Yeah, definitely.
You know, like, what's the right answer?
If it's that A+, I'm not sure who's handing out the grades on art.
There's nobody handing out grades.
I need to go to the school board, the art board, the universal art board and say, I want to contest my grade, please. And I want to reset the test so that I can be given an A+. Yeah, because art is an ongoing process that you never stop kind of growing, changing, evolving. And even when I say that, I think you can turn that into a story in your head that what you're doing is changing, growing and evolving towards this A+, towards this perfection, towards this kind of, you know, I don't think of it as perfection so much as just a certain expectation, which, given time, perhaps a smidgen of maturity and kind of reflection, I can start to recognize as an unreasonable expectation, an unreasonable standard. But certainly there's a particular mark that you're trying to reach. And that's the interesting thing, I think, about art. You can't rank it on a two-dimensional continuum, you know, where you've got a low standard and a medium standard and a high standard, because actually art is a three-dimensional, possibly 4 and 5-dimensional. It goes off in every direction. There's a lot of space for a lot of different art in the world that has different purposes, has different sort of outcomes, that sparks different feelings and results in people. And so from that point of view, even looking at it in a very practical way, how can you possibly place all of that on a kind of a standard bell curve, which is the high standard art, which is the low standard art.
Which is funny too, because recently I was talking to this young artist that my daughter knows, and he was right off the bat showing me his mistakes. He's like, I did this and here's what I did wrong instantly. And I was like, you're the only one who knew what you wanted it to be. You don't have to tell people about your mistake. And I just find that I find that in the studio where I'm like, oh, it's supposed to be this way. We get this idea in our head of what we think it's going to be. I mean, we've talked about this before, and we have this idea of it's going to look like this and this, even though it's like, I don't really think that's a very clear picture when we're imagining that. And then when it comes out a different way, we get so upset with it that we feel that it's failed or it's disappointed us. And you know, I've even gone to the point of like, maybe I should just chuck this thing away. You know, maybe it's just not worth it. And when I can step back and give myself literally like physical space and time, I can look at it and say, am I actually just being hard on it? Like, is it worth throwing away? And I can tell you from the people who collected it that they would say, no, it wasn't worth throwing away. You know what I mean?
You know that I know what you mean, Michelle, because I had that very situation like a few months ago, didn't I? I was working on some pieces and I was treating them more as just a loosening up exercise, and I was playing with some collage and kind of being really relaxed about it, throwing things around. And then I told you that that's what I'd been doing in preparation for going and doing the high standard work in the studio. And I said, nothing worthwhile. And you said, well, can I see? And I said, no, you wouldn't. No, it's just junk. You don't want to see. And I showed you. And then you said, well, there's something here. Are you sure that you don't want to? I'm like, no, it's nothing. It's bits of paper, does nothing for me. But I didn't throw them out. I just slipped them into a folio and left them there. And then about 2 or 3 months later, I came back to you and said, Michele, I really like these. I think there might be something here.
I think there's something here. Yeah. And FYI, I think she's recently shared some stuff on her Instagram showing those.
That's it.
But it just goes to show like how much unseen artwork there would be or is, because we have these hesitations of the standards that we're trying to achieve. And well, what I like to say is, like, even from my perspective of doing this for a while, it doesn't go away. Mm-hmm. We just have to become more aware of it, I think, and really looking at it. Like, I literally have to tell myself, like, yeah, I see you hesitating and twitching. Just do it. Get in there and just do it, Yes. And so I have to give myself a little bit of a pep talk.
And maybe suspending some judgment. Because what I love about that idea and that, experience that I've had is that it just goes to show these ideas that we have that we think are very fixed. I can be very fixed. I can be sure that I know right now the difference between a high standard that I'm happy with and that this particular thing is not that standard. Like right now, I can tell you I'm 100% sure
I'm laughing with you.
what that looks like. And yet a week can go by. Like, have you ever had that experience where you're painting in the studio and you finish the day, it's, time to put the brushes down, and you look at the wall and just think, this is the most hideous thing. I can't believe what a mess I've made. I'm going to have to clear this all out tomorrow and start again. And you go to bed and literally less than 12 hours later, you walk back in and the thing's dried. And the thing that you terribly overworked, and suddenly you're like, that's not so, there's some lovely bits to that.
There's something there.
Yeah. So it just goes to show that it's not fixed. Like just a little bit of, as much as in that moment you can convince yourself that it's perfectly clear, you know exactly how it's entirely wrong, like that painter, your daughter's friend that you're talking about. It's funny. Our minds are tricky tricksters, I guess is what I'm saying.
To me, it sort of speaks into how emotional we are when we're creating, because I've also had the opposite experience too, where I'm in this moment and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. And then the next day I go in the studio and go, oh my God, what was I thinking? Have you had that, or is that just me?
Maybe actually that speaks to our different kind of innate viewpoints, because I think maybe I'm such a hard judge early in the process that it would be, I'm much more likely to go, that's terrible. And you're so open-minded, because I wonder whether, going back to that idea of kind of earlier formative experiences that we had in schooling about what it meant to reach or not reach certain external standards, and then the feedback that we had about that, and then how we responded to that. I wonder if that feeds in a little bit, because we've talked before about you have a real tenacity, I think, with and a different response to when you feel like you've perhaps some level of what one could call failure, like then you're like, well, I go again,
yes.
and I'm a bit more like, oh my God, I collapse in a heap. What has happened?
But I think it does go to show, like, I have had to fail over and over and over. Like, I haven't had those moments where everything was consistently amazing. I really, even when I was doing well in art school, I was really enjoying the work and I was getting good grades, but I did have some teachers who were like, you're not doing it, in the traditional sense of the scope of the project. I was always off doing a little bit like outside of, outside, which is funny because it's like makes perfect sense that I would be doing that.
Little left field, Michelle.
Little left field. I was like, yeah, you want me to do my thesis about this? I'm kind of going to go over here. So I did get a little backlash for that. So even when I felt like I was doing, well and doing things, I still felt a bit of a backlash. I suppose that has built up a little bit of callousness.
Bit of resilience.
Yeah, a bit of resilience and be like, oh yeah? Well, I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah. I'm going to try again.
Yeah.
And I think that it's sort of like there are perks to being underestimated. But
and I think what's important there is your perception that you're underestimated. Because that's what this comes down to. In reality, there's no one out there expecting that Bec's going to get an A+ every day. And there's no one out there thinking, oh, well, Michelle's not going to do better than a D every day. There is no grading group watching us, but that's kind of what we've internalized. It's a story, isn't it, that we've internalized about what we think or just really feel. It's like I experience a bit like a gut feeling, as in a sense of dread that you're not going to meet these kind of expectations or standards, and then that really can push my behavior around.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really goes to show how much it defines the actions that we take and the behaviors that we have around that, and I think like you said, it becomes internalized, and it's like emotion meets these stories that we try to put in this logical box, and it makes absolutely no sense. No one is over your shoulder looking and going, Bec, you were supposed to do A+ work today, or you don't get to proceed.
And what makes even less sense is when you start to unpack it and you think, okay, I'm feeling this reluctance or I'm feeling this fear because I have these standards that I want to reach with my art. And then you think, well, how have these standards and how I'm managing that, perfectionism, anxiety, maybe procrastinating, maybe avoiding the studio, how are those actually helping me achieve those standards? A big fat zero. A big fat zero. Because if you don't go in there, if you can't work with a sense of freedom, then, it's a catch-22.
And the thing that I guess one of the things that I've gotten so much better at is that risk-taking thing that happens where you get surprises from the risks. And with knowing, that I'm going to fail regularly, it's less like a risk doesn't feel like a risk. Yeah. It's like, well, it could suck anyway, So I think for me, it feels more natural to go in. Even though I'm optimistic it could work, I guess I'm not assuming it will because the track record's not always there. But what I find really interesting about art and what I love about it is that it's actually in our mistakes, our experiments, that we find these gems that we couldn't possibly discover without actually failing.
I feel like you've gone a good way along to internalizing kind of the reverse. Your standard is around showing up, and your standard is around making mistakes in order to make the surprises. You've built some of that story within yourself. And when you compare that kind of approach and say, is that kind of approach going to get me closer to any particular standard? Obviously it is, because it's the quantity, it's the exploration. So that's really good when you can kind of turn it around and get something that's more of a, what do I want to say? It's more of a, certainly more fertile. It's a realm of possibility. Being frozen and fearful and anxious and trapped in a sense of particular standards or perfectionism is really shutting down possibilities into this little box that you're stuck in and you can't, move. But if you could turn it around and make the story about having a standard of showing up and a standard of making mistakes, like the more mistakes I can make.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right. That is the shift for me, is the commitment to showing up is the standard, and really making failure specifically, part of a strategy. So it's not a surprise because it's going to happen anyway. For me, I haven't found really great paintings have come from so much thinking and less play.
Yeah.
I've just found that the play is where all the juicy bits come from. When I'm in the studio, when I'm hesitating on something, I'm like, remember, this is how the good stuff comes. You know, like it's
that.
like I have to tell myself it's going to be okay, because even if you mess it up, you can keep going and do something else. And like, it's not the end. I think we worry so much about, the perfect mark. I don't do a lot of work with brushes at the moment, but I remember feeling like, oh, this one mark's got to be just perfect, as if that's going to, like, it usually gets covered up anyway. Like, what am I worried about, And then if you mix colors wrong and you experiment and you push it into this direction, like, it's not the end of the world. You can, go over them. And it took me a long time as a painter to figure out, like, I can just go over things.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I was a little bit slow learner on that side of it, because I worked a lot with transparencies, and I really was like not getting how that would work to cover those. But I mean, I think the thing that is most fun about painting is that you literally can change everything. It's never permanent. There's nothing static about it ever, until you actually pass it along to someone and they hang it on their walls and they don't want it to change. But you can literally change it over and over and over. And so I think that freedom in that gives me that confidence. Like, you don't have to be precious. It's okay. You can go in there and take that risk. It's not the end of the world. Again, no one's dying.
No one's dying. No one's dying.
No one's
I like
dying.
what you're saying as well around the idea that kind of remembering that the best things have come from play. I think another version of that would be, because I know surprise is a really big value for you, but now I think about it, the best things come from surprise, not certainty. So that's another thing to think about. So if you're working really hard towards being certain about your next step, you can say, hang on, that's a sign that I'm not in the right place to be surprised. I want to make surprise my standard and play my standard and showing up my standard.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is the other part that's really cool as artists. I think because it is that area that we get to design what that looks like for us. It's not something that is set in stone. And looking at our standards, I think it's really interesting, because this conversations has really come back to what are our standards, as artists, and values that we have, and what values are really giving us what we want and what values aren't giving us what we want.
Yeah.
And then redefining those. But really being aware of that in the sense that you can really change them.
Yes.
Because I think if we don't really acknowledge what's happening for us internally, then we're not able to kind of make those big changes. And those big changes really look like lots of little changes. They're not like one big, oh my gosh, I'm done being a perfectionist.
Yeah, because like you say, it comes up. It's more about how quickly you recognize that something taking you down the path and having a chance to redirect.
Absolutely. And it's for me, it's very quick. I can see, it's like a physical experience for me. I don't know what it's like for you, but I definitely feel like it's like this invisible wall is holding my physical body in a place.
Oh my God, yes.
And it's...
Yes, I feel that too.
Okay. And when I feel that, it's almost like this magnetic, I don't even know how to explain it. To me, it feels like an energy kind of thing. I'm like, I see you. I got you. I know what we're doing here. And I'm like, it's going to be okay. Go get the materials you need. Take the next step. Like I can literally see myself. It's like a little dance that I'm doing where I'm trapped behind this invisible wall and my hands don't want to, do the thing, and I'm looking.
Yes.
I'm like,
yes.
It's like, take the step.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
So then you get really in the moment. Like, what's the next little
Then I just
step?
I just literally go grab that, paint or whatever thing I need to work with. And I literally grab it, put it down, and just, make that decision.
It's really interesting that you mentioned values, because what kills me every time when I think about this is what I'm talking about is a discomfort with uncertainty and, like a desire to have particular answers, to have a desire to have a known path, to have certainty that what I'm going to do next is going to work. And I find it funny because when you reflect on what are my values and the kind of choices I've been making over the course of my life, I can look at the arc of my work life and my creative life is I'm been moving more and more towards embracing more ambiguous expressions. I worked as a librarian, so that can be considered quite a structured way of thinking and looking to the world. And that as a writer and as an artist, I've been really drawn towards the very thing. I'm sure there's some kind of wanting to face what you fear most or something going on, because I've been drawn more and more towards ways of exploring uncertainty and dabbling in that, because I guess a part of me finds it really exciting, and yet at the same time I'm pulling against it.
It's terrifying.
Yes, thank you. Terrifying. That's quite accurate. So it's good to look at that, to step back and look at what are my bigger values. And I think that's a really important thing, that something that I've been coming to grips with, that when you do feel that you're at that invisible wall, when you do feel frozen and you are kind of afraid to go into the studio, and after you get past the initial excuses that it's a time thing or I don't have the right materials, and when you start to get down to it, why can I not just get in there and start doing the thing? There are lots of layers to this, and we've talked in a previous episode about finding your why and really digging into your values, what you get most out of being an artist, what you're in it for, and therefore, tying your actions to that. But I think also, even if you've got that and now you are really invested in this bigger vision of what you want to achieve and you're invested in why you want to show up, you could still experience that kind of paralysis and that fear. And then that's when you start looking at these beliefs and stories, and you can start unpacking those. And you know what? It can still show up. Knowing that they exist still doesn't make you immune to feeling that. And then you're getting into your bodies and emotions. And we've talked about that, doing body work, doing some meditation. So there's multiple layers. And sometimes along with this idea of perfectionism and high standards, I'd have to say that I can get into a state where I'm kind of applying those even more deeply to how I show up. And what I mean by that is that it feels like a kind of a wasted time to have to stop and do, the meditation, or to kind of take care of myself in that way. I think, oh, come on, why can't you be an artist who just shows up 9:00 in the morning, walks in confidently and gets on with the job? So there's layers of judgment. There's layers of standard.
There's a massive amount of layers of judgment. And the other thing I want to point out too is that we have this idea of this, again, this goes back to, maybe this is just me, but this idea of this is what we're going to be as a perfect artist. We're going to show up, we're going to do this thing, and we're going to be like this. And so instead of understanding it's a gradual process to change our behaviors, we think it should be instantaneous. It's not. I mean, it's just not. It's a gradual. I don't necessarily find that I hesitate to get in the studio as much as I used to in the beginning. It was gradual. I find that I don't hesitate as much now, over time on an actual painting, but I still do. So I think, but it's all gradual. It's not just poof, we're the perfect artist.
And then do you find, and not... I mean this in a positive way, not to be a depressing way, but do you find that then other, challenges or other things come up and then you work on those things?
Yes. So I guess from my perspective, I think it's an illusion that any of this goes away 100%. I think what is interesting is if we can start to notice little small things that are changes. How do we catch ourselves when we find ourselves in this invisible wall and we're resisting to go in the studio? How can we catch ourselves and slowly going, I'm going to go in there. It's going to be okay. And I always, when I was resisting, when I was earlier in my painting, I would just go in and sometimes clean up because it made me feel okay, I'm here. And then I found I just started playing because I was accidentally cleaning up some paint that I thought maybe I could play with. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think that it's more subtle in the gradual progress. And to think that we're going to become this perfect artist, as in we're not fearful of things, that's just crazy in my opinion. Because even when I have opportunity opportunities come up now, I still find my old autopilot fears pop up and go, well, this isn't possible.
Your brain starts immediately looking for the why nots.
Yes.
Why not? Why this isn't going to work? Why
Yes.
I can't do this thing? Why it's wired to look for those problems. And
Yes.
I find it kind of hopeful in a way, Bec with her kind of backwards thinking, that it's not a continuum of, I'm starting here at the beginning and at some point I'm going to become the perfect artist and the perfect person who doesn't have any of these problems. And the reason why that's hopeful is it means it's not a race.
Yes.
It means that, you're not further behind. It's not like, if only I could, be in the advanced class. I could get to it more quickly it's actually...
Yeah. There's no advanced class. See, that's the bonus of not actually doing a lot of advanced classes.
Yeah.
But it's true.
I guess, when I was talking about the standards earlier, it's more of a three-dimensional thing. You're not on a single two-dimensional continuum. It's the same for the journey of your art. You're not actually on a continuum from beginning artist to excellent artist at the end. You're actually in this kind of whole sphere, and sometimes you're this kind of artist, sometimes you're that. I mean, hopefully, I really hope, and I know that this is something that we value in the way that we think about art and we talk about in this podcast. We value the new discoveries, which means that you might change direction as an artist.
And guess what happens when you change directions? You're at the beginning again of not feeling like you know what you're always doing. I think that...
But that's growth, right?
Yeah, it can be challenging because you're like, I really expect to know what I'm doing. But I think the reality is, like, whenever you grow and change, it's just a new experience. And so if we can start looking at it from, okay, this is a new experience, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to always suck. And this one mistake is going to be defining me,
Defining suckfulness.
Yeah. I am constantly surprising myself on how new I feel to the game, even with successful paintings. And I think that's because I'm always trying new things.
And if we reverse positions right now and you told me what I'm about to say to you, I'd probably want to come through the screen and sock you. But because I know that can feel terrible in the moment. But when you think about it from the outside, isn't that freaking awesome?
Yes.
That you can feel like a beginner again and again in your life, that we don't actually get to a point in our life when we're 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 and think, it's all done. I know everything there is to know. Everything's routine. Actually, you can, that's the exciting thing about making art.
For me, that's the adventure. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love to evolve my work, is I really do love that new experience of discovery and finding new things and challenging myself. I think that's the other thing is, I wasn't really an A student, as we know by now, but I have a real great appreciation for challenging myself. Mm-hmm. And, that didn't always make sense when I took Russian randomly, in university for a year.
Wow. How did that go?
It was really fun and
Excellent.
Super creative because the teacher was really good. But I was really interested in seeing in a different way, even back then. And I was 20 and I was like, I wonder what this would be like. If I look back on my life, I'm even from an early age, in high school, making choices of electives and things that would just give me a different weird perspective, that did not make sense.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I love those moments of a kind of insight. I guess that for me, I would relate that to the way you've talked about wanting to be surprised in the studio.
Yeah.
I love the payout of those moments of sudden insight or clarity. And logically, I can absolutely say that they don't come because they're surprising connections. They're moments where ideas connect that I couldn't have anticipated. That's why they're thrilling. If it was really obvious from the beginning, then
it would
it doesn't, it's no thrill.
Right.
I will say one little insight I had about this in the last week. And I was thinking about this idea of having unreasonably high standards, that you're going to get it right the first time. And if you don't, then you failed in some way. And that also that you should somehow be able to manage things in a really effortless way, whether that's your, what you're doing in the studio, whether that's these kind of beliefs and things that you've picked up. And I was just thinking, hang on a minute, who do you think you are? Why would you think that you should be able to do all of these things any more than anyone else? Because I feel like we often hold ourselves to higher standards and pour more judgment on ourselves than we do other people around us.
Yes.
We kind of get this idea of ourselves as being somehow, we don't think of it that way, but somehow able to be superhuman,
yes.
to be, above what it means to be human, which is to be messy and to have feelings and to have beliefs and hangovers from, shit we've been through and stuff like that.
I know.
So, hey, you're a human being. Just
be human.
Just be human. Just show up. Enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride.
You don't get to know what it's going to be ahead of time. That's part of the deal in being human, isn't it?
Yeah, I like that phrase. And the thing is, what I find laughable, and I'm laughing with you, not at you.
Yeah.
But if we're like, oh yeah, that's what it's going to be exactly, you and I would be like, well, we're not going to do that.
That is so true.
We're not going to do that. Well, that's boring.
Hey, human condition, people. That's what it is.
Oh,
we have these things.
We are human, and there's no getting around being human. It doesn't matter how much experience. So I would just say to anyone listening who's new or maybe intermediate, I've been at it for a while, but I still have the same things come up, and I still feel like I'm a beginner, as well. And I think again that is mindset. Probably because I'm looking for that ride we just talked about. So as long as you can be more gentle, I think that is required over time.
Yeah.
Because one thing I do know is the suffering that I've added because, I've tortured myself with my internal thoughts. That hasn't actually benefited me. So I think learning to be gentler to ourselves, like give yourself some space. Maybe it's a few weeks to see things and go, wow, that actually wasn't so bad. Or if you're like me and you think, wow, that was the best thing ever, and then it sucks the next day, don't be disappointed. Go at it again. I think being gentler and again, realizing that it is this ride that's full of ups and downs, and we're just human. And that's what we're here to do. I think what I want to help artists do through this podcast and other things is to really help in the suffering that we give ourselves.
Yeah.
That to me, that's been a bit of a game changer when I can catch myself and just, I wouldn't say delete the suffering, but definitely shorten it.
Absolutely. And I think talking about it, having these conversations is so important, because when we think it's just weird little old us, and we're by ourselves in our studios having all these horrible feelings, it feels so much worse. But if you can talk about it and go, oh, hey, lots of people feel this way, and maybe even have a laugh about it, maybe even have a laugh.
Have a few laughs.
It can really bring a different energy, can't it?
Yes, definitely. And just to wrap this up, I would love for you, Bec, to go in the studio and just literally make something that you're like, that is the best thing ever. And then not like it the next day. Like, I just want you to experience that.
Okay. I feel like you're putting a curse on me, but okay.
Well, maybe you just go in shooting for a C and you're completely happy with it.
Yeah, perfect.